For 10,000 years, the Alarian Empire reigned over the Orion arm of the galaxy with a cold, absolute precision that defied the chaotic nature of the universe. To the Alarians, emotion was not a virtue, it was a biological defect, a chaotic variable that had been systematically bred out of their species over generations of genetic tailoring and cybernetic integration. Their society was a monument to flawless logic, where every citizen was a gear in a grand, interstellar machine, and the imperial lineage was the central processor guiding their collective destiny. Prince Kaelen was engineered to be the pinnacle of this design, a perfect heir with analytical processing units wired directly into his cerebral cortex, destined to command a fleet of dreadnoughts that kept 1,000 worlds in quiet submission. Yet, beneath the flawless silver sheen of his skin and the synthetic perfection of his neural pathways, a rare genetic anomaly quietly flickered to life, allowing him to feel the heavy, suffocating weight of a life devoid of warmth. While his father, Emperor Vorth, looked upon the star charts with a cold hunger for efficiency and resource allocation, Kaelen looked at the same holographic maps and felt a profound, aching emptiness. He was forced to watch the quiet subjugation of outer rim worlds, witnessing the systematic dismantling of local cultures in the name of imperial progress, and each report of standardized integration felt like a physical blow to his chest. He learned to mask his reactions, utilizing his neural dampeners to mimic the flat, unbothered baseline of his peers, but the strain of living a double life was eroding his sanity. Every night, high in the spires of the capital world of Alaria Prime, he would disable his cybernetic logs for a brief, precious hour and stare out at the endless sea of stars, wondering if there was a corner of the cosmos where a soul could simply exist without being measured, weighed, and found wanting. The tipping point came when the Imperial High Command detected unusual energy signatures emanating from a quiet, blue and green world designated as SOL-3, located on the extreme, undeveloped fringes of the Orion Arm. The planet was deemed too primitive for formal integration, but its abundant liquid water and rich biosphere made it an attractive candidate for future resource harvesting. Kaelen, desperate for an escape from the suffocating courtly politics of the capital, volunteered to lead the covert reconnaissance mission himself. His father approved the request, viewing it as a routine exercise to test the young prince's strategic deployment capabilities before he was given command of a full battle group. As Kaelen's stealth scout ship slipped into the shadow of Earth's moon, he felt a strange, electric anticipation humming through his veins. A sensation his internal diagnostics flagged as an error, but one he chose, for the first time in his life, to actively ignore. Descending into Earth's atmosphere under the cover of a localized rainstorm, Kaelen engaged his ship's sensory cloaking array and landed in a secluded coastal forest in the Pacific Northwest. Stepping out into the cool, damp air, he was instantly overwhelmed by the sheer, unfiltered sensory assault of the planet. The scent of wet pine, the distant, rhythmic roar of the ocean, and the heavy drag of a gravity well far stronger than the synthetic environments of his youth. Using a holographic disguise matrix to mimic the physical appearance of a local human, he wandered toward the coastline, his optical sensors struggling to process the chaotic beauty of a world untouched by imperial geometry. It was there, standing on a rocky cliffside overlooking the churning gray waves of the Pacific, that he first saw Maya. Maya was a marine biology student, and on that particular afternoon, she was fighting against a sudden, violent gale to rescue a juvenile harbor seal that had become desperately entangled in a mass of discarded commercial fishing nets. Kaelen watched from the tree line, his logical programming insisting that he remain hidden and observe, yet his anomaly drove him forward as he witnessed her struggle. She was drenched to the bone, her hands raw and bleeding from the coarse rope, yet her eyes held an intense, unwavering determination that he had never seen in any Alarian citizen. She did not calculate the biological cost-benefit ratio of saving the creature, she simply acted out of pure, fierce empathy, screaming over the wind as she finally sliced the last net free and watched the animal slip back into the safety of the dark waves. Exhausted but triumphant, Maya collapsed onto the wet sand, laughing aloud at the sheer joy of the successful rescue despite the freezing rain pouring down around her. Kaelen, utterly captivated by this display of raw spirit, stepped out of the shadows, pretending to be a lost traveler who had lost his way along the coastal hiking trails. Expecting the human to react with fear or suspicion toward a stranger, he was stunned when she immediately offered him her dry spare jacket and a warm thermos of tea, asking nothing in return but his name. In that brief, quiet moment on a storm-swept beach, as the warmth of the human beverage seeped through his disguise, Kaelen realized that the Alarian archives had lied. Humanity was not a weak, primitive species destined for the harvest. They possessed a beautiful, terrifying spark that he knew he could never allow his empire to extinguish. Over the next several months, the covert scouting mission transformed into a quiet, deliberate act of desertion. Kaelen spent every available hour with Maya, learning the complex nuances of human interaction, the joy of shared laughter, and the bittersweet beauty of a finite lifespan. He learned that humans did not need neural links to understand one another. They used music, art, and the simple comfort of presence to bridge the gaps between their minds. With Maya, he experienced the thrill of tasting real food, the quiet peace of watching a sunset without analyzing its chemical composition, and the profound, healing power of a love that demanded nothing but his true self. The cold, mechanical prince of Alaria was slowly, beautifully unraveling, replaced by a young man who finally felt like he belonged. But as the deadline for his return to the Imperial fleet drew near, Kaelen knew he had to make a choice that would alter the course of his life forever. He could return to Alaria Prime, take up his crown, and eventually lead the very armada that would strip Earth of its oceans and atmosphere, or he could throw everything away for a chance at a quiet, mortal life. Choosing love over empire, Kaelen meticulously planned his escape, using his advanced technical knowledge to override his ship's automated return protocols and plotting a course that would simulate a catastrophic drive failure near a localized black hole. He stripped his body of the painful, subcutaneous royal tracking beacons, enduring the agonizing extraction process in the dark cabin of his scout ship with nothing but a human medical kit and sheer willpower. With the tracking implants destroyed and his death successfully faked in the Imperial databases, Kaelen guided the damaged scout ship down to a crash landing in the deep waters of the Pacific, letting the ocean swallow the last remnants of his past. He walked out of the water and straight to Maya's doorstep, battered, bleeding, and entirely free. When she opened the door and saw him standing there in the pouring rain, she didn't ask questions about where he had been or why he looked so broken. She simply pulled him into a tight, fierce embrace that made his artificial heart beat with a wild, natural rhythm. For the first time in his existence, Kaelen was home, ready to trade the cold infinity of the cosmos for the warm, messy reality of a life with the girl who had saved him. 2 years passed in a blur of peaceful domesticity, and the quiet coastal town of Redwood Cove became Kaelen's sanctuary. To the local townspeople, he was simply K, a quiet, fiercely intelligent young man with striking silver blue eyes and a slight, charming accent that no one could quite place. He took a job at a local electronics repair shop, marveling at the primitive simplicity of human circuitry while secretly upgrading the town's outdated power grids and water filtration systems under the guise of routine maintenance. He and Maya rented a small, weathered cottage overlooking the bay, filling it with books, mismatched furniture, and the gentle, constant hum of a shared life that felt more valuable than any planetary conquest. Kaelen threw himself into learning the everyday rituals of humanity, finding a strange, meditative peace in tasks that his people would have relegated to low-level automation. He learned the delicate art of flipping pancakes without burning them, the confusing logistics of filing local property taxes, and the simple pleasure of holding Maya's hand during long, silent walks along the foggy shoreline. Maya, meanwhile, continued her graduate studies, her passion for the ocean matching Kaelen's quiet devotion to her, and together they built a quiet world that felt entirely insulated from the cold, uncaring universe outside. Yet, even in his happiest moments, Kaelen could never completely shake the habit of staring up at the night sky, his advanced vision tracing the distant orbits of Alarian patrol ships that he prayed would never look down. As the months turned to years, the physical differences between Kaelen and his human neighbors became easier to manage, though his advanced physiology occasionally presented unique challenges. He had to consciously slow his reaction times during friendly pickup games of soccer, mimic the sound of heavy breathing after a long run, and artificially warm his skin temperature to match Maya's when they cuddled on cold winter nights. But these minor inconveniences were a small price to pay for the profound sense of peace that filled his days, a peace that made him believe, if only for a moment, that he had truly outrun the reach of his father's empire. He was no longer a prince, no longer a weapon of conquest. He was just a man who loved a woman, living on a fragile, beautiful world that he would gladly die to protect. The illusion of safety began to fracture on a crisp, mid-autumn afternoon when the local wildlife of Redwood Cove began to exhibit deeply unnatural behaviors. Kaelen was working on a broken radio receiver in his shop when he noticed a flock of migratory geese flying in a perfect, geometric hexagonal formation directly over the bay, a pattern utilized exclusively by Alarian tactical recon formations to map planetary geography. His internal systems, though stripped of their royal networks, still possessed passive sensory arrays that began to register a low, persistent static hum vibrating through the local electromagnetic spectrum. It was a frequency he recognized instantly, one designed to jam primitive communications networks and prep a local sector for tactical orbital extraction. As the days went on, the anomalies grew more pronounced and impossible to ignore for anyone trained in the art of galactic warfare. The local television broadcasts flickered with strange, localized static, the tides behaved erratically as if influenced by a localized gravity displacer, and the beautiful night sky over the cove began to ripple with a faint, shimmering aurora that had no scientific business appearing in the Pacific Northwest. Kaelen kept his fears hidden from Maya, not wanting to shatter the beautiful life they had built, but he quietly began retrieving the salvaged Alarian technology he had hidden beneath the floorboards of their cottage. He knew the signs of an active hunt. His faked death had kept him hidden for 2 years, but the Empire's relentless search algorithms had finally flagged his biological signature. One evening, while walking back from the harbor, Kaelen found a small, metallic sphere floating silently in the shadow of an old redwood tree, its red optical sensor spinning slowly as it scanned the surrounding flora. It was an Alarian seeker drone, a silent hunter designed to track royal bloodlines across light years of space, and its presence meant that the net was rapidly closing around them. With a quick, practiced movement, Kaelen reached out and crushed the drone's sensory core, disabling its transmitter before it could relay his exact coordinates back to the command ship hovering in high orbit. He hurried back to the cottage, his heart pounding with a cold, familiar dread as he realized that the peaceful interlude of his life on Earth was over, and the shadow of his past had finally caught up to him. The storm arrived on a Tuesday night, but it was not a storm born of Earth's atmosphere. It was a localized atmospheric disruption caused by a descending cloaked assault transport. Inside the cottage, the air grew heavy and cold, the scent of ozone filling the small rooms as the power grid died, plunging the house and the surrounding neighborhood into an absolute, suffocating darkness. Maya looked up from the kitchen table where she had been studying, her brow furrowed in confusion as the digital clock on the stove flickered out and the comforting hum of the refrigerator went dead. "Kay, what's going on with the power?" she asked, her voice carrying a note of unease that instantly put Kaelen on high alert. Before he could answer, the front door of their home did not just break. It was entirely vaporized by a silent, high-frequency sonic blast that sent a shower of wooden splinters and plaster dust cascading into the living room. Through the ruined entryway stepped 3 towering figures, their sleek obsidian power armor absorbing the dim ambient light of the storm outside, their faces hidden behind cold, glowing crimson visors. Leading the squad was Commander Varric, a veteran of 100 planetary campaigns and the Emperor's most ruthless enforcer, his heavy boots crushing the floorboards as he stepped into the ruined home. "Prince Kaelen," Varric's synthesized voice resonated with a flat, mechanical authority that chilled the air. "The Emperor has grown tired of your childish rebellion. You will return to face re-education." Kaelen immediately threw himself in front of Maya, shielding her body with his own as he raised his hands in a desperate, pleading gesture. "Varric, stop. I will go with you quietly, without a fight, if you just leave her alone. She has nothing to do with this," he shouted, his voice cracking with an emotion that the Alarian commander could only perceive as a pathetic biological glitch. Varric turned his cold, red visor toward Maya, slowly raising his heavy plasma caster as its power cells began to hum with a deadly, azure light. The native is an unregistered biological contaminant, Prince. She will be liquidated to ensure your absolute compliance with the extraction protocols. To the Alarian Empire, Earth was classified as a low-priority, primitive world. But that classification was based on an egregious misunderstanding of what it took to survive on SOL-3. In the sterile, low-gravity domes of Alaria Prime, physical strength was an obsolete concept, replaced by cybernetic enhancements and automated labor, leaving the Alarians physically brittle and heavily reliant on their power armor. They did not understand that Earth was a Category 5 death world, a brutal, high-gravity crucible where life had to fight tooth and nail just to survive. Humans had evolved dense, highly resilient muscle fibers, lightning-fast neural reflexes, and a biological survival drive that allowed them to temporarily bypass their own physical limitations through the sheer, explosive release of adrenaline. As Varric's soldier stepped forward to seize Kaelen, his plasma rifle rising toward Maya's chest, the human girl did not scream, freeze, or beg for her life as the Alarian databases predicted a primitive would. Instead, the primitive instincts of a species that had survived ice ages, apex predators, and endless wars flared to life within her, her vision narrowing as her heart pumped a massive surge of adrenaline through her veins. Before the Alarian soldier could register her movement on his high-speed tactical HUD, Maya moved with a fluid, terrifying speed that bypassed their calculated reaction times entirely. She stepped inside the soldier's guard, her hands locking onto his armored wrist with a grip that exerted hundreds of pounds of raw, gravity-hardened pressure. With a sickening, metallic crunch that echoed through the small cottage, Maya crushed the high-grade composite alloy of the soldier's gauntlet, shattering the delicate cybernetic servos beneath and causing him to drop his plasma rifle. Before the second soldier could react, Maya swept her leg inward, catching him behind the knee and using his own top-heavy armor weight against him to slam him violently through the wooden floorboards. The sheer, primal force of her movement was staggering. She was not a fragile creature of clay to be swept aside, she was an apex predator defending her mate, and the Alarians were suddenly finding themselves on the wrong end of the food chain. The remaining soldier lunged forward, his heavy armored fist whistling through the air in a trajectory meant to decapitate, but Maya's reflexes, honed by years of navigating treacherous ocean currents and split-second rescue maneuvers, allowed her to duck beneath the blow. She snatched the fallen plasma caster from the floor, using its heavy, reinforced barrel as a blunt instrument to strike the soldier square in the center of his chest plate. The impact was deafening, the sheer physical force of her strike denting the advanced alien armor and sending the 200-pound soldier flying backward through the dry wall, crashing into the muddy soil of the backyard. Commander Varric stumbled backward, his internal heads-up display flashing a frantic cascade of red warning lights and error messages as his tactical algorithms struggled to process the sudden, violent defeat of his elite squad. Warning: biological force limits exceeded. Target is an unregistered class, a kinetic threat. Immediate tactical retreat advised. Varric looked from his broken soldiers to Maya, who stood in the center of the ruined living room, her chest heaving, her eyes burning with a fierce, protective fire, and broken pieces of alien metal dripping from her hands. You are monsters," Varric whispered, his synthesized voice trembling as the cold, logical structure of his reality shattered around him. Kaelen stepped out from behind Maya, his expression calm, almost sorrowful, as he looked at his former commander. "I tried to warn you, Varric. I didn't run away to Earth because I was weak, or because I had lost my mind. I came here because humans are the most formidable, resilient force in this galaxy, and I wanted to be on the side of a species that actually knows what it means to fight for something they love." He took a step closer, his own silver eyes glowing with a quiet intensity. "Now, take your men and leave this planet, before she decides to show you what else a human can do when their home is threatened." Recognizing that his physical extraction mission had failed catastrophically, Varric quickly activated his personal emergency teleporter, a bright blue bubble of spatial energy wrapping around his armored frame. "This is not the end, traitor," Varric hissed, his voice filled with a desperate, bitter venom as his body began to pixelate into light. The Emperor will not allow this insult to stand. He will send the main battle fleet, and we will burn this primitive death world to a cinder, leaving nothing but ash and bone." With a final, blinding flash of light, Varric and his remaining soldiers vanished, leaving behind a ruined cottage, a shattered door, and a heavy, suffocating silence. Maya dropped the broken piece of armor she was holding, her shoulders shaking slightly as the massive surge of adrenaline began to drain from her system, leaving her physically exhausted but mentally sharp. She turned to Kaelen, her eyes wide with a sudden, terrifying realization of the scale of the threat they now faced. If his fleet comes here, Earth doesn't stand a chance. We don't have space fleets, we don't have plasma shields, we don't even have a unified planetary defense. How do we fight an empire that rules 1,000 worlds? She reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she touched his arm, looking to him for an answer she wasn't sure existed. Kaelen walked over to the dining room table, which had miraculously survived the skirmish, and pulled his battered Earth laptop from his backpack. Despite the localized electromagnetic jammer still active in the area, the laptop's screen suddenly flared to life, its ordinary operating system overridden by a complex, glowing holographic interface that projected a three-dimensional map of the Alarian Empire's entire military infrastructure into the dusty air of the room. "They won't have to fight with Earth's current technology, Maya," Kaelen said, a calm, confident smile spreading across his face as he looked at the glowing schematic of his father's dreadnoughts. "I didn't just run away from my family, Maya," Kaelen revealed, his voice steady and resolute as he looked into her eyes, showing her the depth of the plan he had quietly executed over the last 2 years. "I knew they would eventually find me, and I knew what my father would do to this world if he thought it was weak. So, before I faked my death and destroyed my tracking implants, I initiated a deep-core data siphon of the Alarian military mainframe. I stole the keys to the entire empire." He tapped a single key on the laptop, and a massive, encrypted data stream began uploading directly into a secure, hidden server network that he had spent his nights constructing. "This data contains the complete schematics for our FTL hyperdrives, our planetary defense shielding, our quantum disruption weaponry, and the precise navigational coordinates for every military staging ground in the Alarian fleet," Kaelen explained, his eyes reflecting the blue light of the holographic display. "And right now, it is being uploaded directly to Earth's Global Defense Coalition, along with the precise instructions on how to integrate this technology into Earth's existing military infrastructure." He walked over to Maya, taking her hand in his, their fingers interlocking in a silent, unbreakable vow of defiance against the stars. In the cold, silent void of high orbit, the cloaked Alarian spy ships suddenly detected a massive, unprecedented spike in power signatures emanating from every military facility across the globe. The humans were not panicking, they were not preparing to surrender, and they were not running. They were upgrading. Their factories and bases hummed with the sudden, explosive integration of high-grade alien technology. For 10,000 years, the Alarian Empire had ruled without fear, but as the first human starships began to fire up their newly integrated hyperdrives, looking up into the dark with a cold, protective fury, the galaxy was about to learn a terrifying truth. You do not threaten a death world, and you never, ever threaten the home of a human. If you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe my channel.